I cannot think of a sadder way to die than with a recognition, a realization that you never showed up in the world as who you really are.
Yeah.
What a waste. What a waste. I showed up, I've tried to show up with my brokenness as well as my gifts, because I believe that wholeness does not mean perfection. Wholeness means integrating your brokenness into your sense of self. Leonard Cohen said it well, ring the bells that still can ring, forget your perfect offering. There's a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. And my own writing journey proves that, because I do hear more about depression than I hear about the professional contributions I've made.
And I don't know when you wrote The Active Life, because I think that's what I was reading most like recently in preparation for our conversation with you. I think it was in this book that you wrote, something positive is happening through our pain. We say we are being disillusioned. Pain is one of the sure signs that contemplation is happening. So I
Yeah.
love how you found positivity through your pain in sharing that to the world. And I'm thinking about the paradox of the pandemic and the suffering and the pain that occurs right now. And I feel like it's privileged for me to maybe suggest that the pandemic provides an opportunity. I don't know, how does that land with you? I just love how you approached your depression and sharing it. You owned it and helped the world in doing so. And that idea of through the darkness, we can find light. Is there light to be found through the pandemic?
Well, I think there is, but as I said when we began talking about depression, not one size fits all, right? And so the comments I'm making are simply about me and my life, and if they resonate with others, I'm glad. If they don't, I understand. I'm very aware on this question of privilege that I am among the most privileged people on the face of the earth. I'm white, I'm male, I'm straight, I'm educated. I did not grow up uh, with wealth. I grew up with hardworking, blue collar and business roots. First in my family to go to college, and I don't have massive wealth now, but I'm certainly comfortable, and I'm in many respects my life is the safest you can find in this economically unjust and racially unjust country. As well as RE, sexual orientation, et cetera, et cetera. The only marginal group I'm in is old farts, right? Like old white men who don't know what's going on. And you do catch projections of that, which I try to do my Three Musketeers thing and fend them off. But it's clear to me that these words I'm about to speak may fall on the ears of people for whom they don't work at all. But I'll just say this. In the course of my life, which began in community organizing in Washington, D.C. in 1969, in the wake of the cities burning across the country, which is what took me away from academic life into social engagement, and then 5 years later to this Quaker community to learn more about nonviolent social change. In the course of my life, I've been blessed with a lot of Black African-American colleagues of various sorts, various levels of education, various social roles and places. I've also been blessed with a lot of LGBTQ plus folk who hung out in those same places with overlapping movement aims. And I will say, especially about my friends and colleagues who are people of color, simply because I've spent more time in more depth with them than any other disinherited group. I will say this, those people that I know stand on the shoulders of 12 generations of ancestors who have been systematically and systemically demeaned and deprived and treated with immense cruelty in private and public ways. But each of those generations, with even given the few degrees of freedom they had, took some step, often a spiritually based step, toward affirming their own dignity and reaching for their own rights and their own freedom. They found all of that within, and in 12, it took 12 generations with slow steps to then, in the mid 20th century, give rise to a generation of young people. John Lewis, with whom I went on a civil rights pilgrimage a few years back, being a prime example. He was, I think, 24 when he led the march across the Edmund Pettus Bridge. Talk about drawing on unprivileged and suffering. The friends and colleagues I have in mind have done exactly that. And on my list of the wisest people I've ever known, they share top place with some other folks I could name. So I've been surrounded for 50 years by living examples of people who have transformed the hardest kind of suffering into wisdom, into insight, who do not share my privileged place in life. And they are living testimony to me that it's possible. Now, you never step into the same stream twice. So what happened in the 60s is not what's happening today. I remember a very simple wake-up call for me when I was watching a televised moment in Ferguson, Missouri, with Black Lives Matter, and there was a woman there wearing a black T-shirt with white lettering that said, "This ain't your mama's civil rights movement." And I got the message. I stepped into a stream back then. It's not the same stream today, and there were responses back then that aren't the same responses today. So I'm not an old guy trying to tell the kids how to do it, because that's the way we did it in my time. But I'm simply trying to convey this rich stew of human experience that I've had the privilege to tap into, and which has generated hope in me. Even in depression, it generated hope. I sometimes thought about those friends when I was capable of thinking at all. And my thought was, if they can make it, I can. If they can claim life, I can. If they can keep on walking, I can. And it was, empowering for me. So this is really tough times, because it's apocalypse on so many fronts that we can barely count them. And so much of it was not necessarily generated, but exacerbated by 4 years of the most incompetent and corrupt administration in my lifetime, and I reckon almost in the history of the country. That's where historians are coming down at the moment. And it's set out to deconstruct our government. And people voted for it on that basis because they were so disgusted with government. And I get that. Who doesn't? But the forces that we've seen at work recently, let's talk about January 6th for a moment, the insurrection, the failed insurrection. They consisted of people who simply don't believe in democracy, period. They believe in a mob rule version of populism. They didn't have any ideas about how to get those vaccines manufactured and into the arms of millions of people. They didn't have any ideas about infrastructure reconstruction so that our cars don't fall through bridges high over rivers. They didn't have any ideas about how to get the mail efficiently delivered. And they elected an administration that didn't have any ideas about that either, and that kind of almost purposely, it seems to me, appointed people to key cabinet positions who had no idea what they were doing because they didn't want to do it. You know, so Betsy DeVos ends up running a system of public education that she doesn't even believe in. It's astonishing, and people voted for that, and lots of people voted for that. And then, of course, there's QAnon, who believe that leading Democrats are strangling this country by running a pedophile ring out of the back of a pizza parlor in Washington, D.C. And if you ask me how to respond to that, I don't have the foggiest idea.
Right.
I really don't, except maybe to go in and order a pizza as a citizen affirmation that there's nothing wrong going on here. It's, you know, so we've reached, well, final word on that. It has been apocalyptic. There are many apocalypses, but in its Greek roots, in its original meaning, as many of us know now, apocalypse meant revelation. And much has been revealed about the truth of American society. And part of my hope at this moment is that more white people with my kind of privilege are more keenly aware of what's been revealed and wanting to act on it in positive political ways to reclaim what we can of a democracy embedded in a republic. That they, if people like me are thinking about how do I use my privilege for the sake of the common good, then along with those young people and marginalized people, people of color, LGBTQ plus folk who rallied in this election to change so much, just look at Georgia, then I think we have some hope when that coalition emerges, as it has been, in ways that no one could have predicted 10 years ago.
We must rise to the majestic heights of meeting physical force with soul force.